Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to a little discussion on Dahlia Photoperiod control. And we'll talk about dahlias in general a little bit. The vegetative dahlia has really made a huge difference in dahlia production for both the greenhouse grower and the consumer. One of the things vegetative production has done is it uniforms the dahlia production. Often, if we go to tuberous dahlias, they're great, except the variability in growth and the variability, particularly early on in production, is tough. So the vegetative dahlia has made really a huge difference in dahlias, and the garden performance on the vegetative dahlias across series is just absolutely outstanding for consumers. But there are some issues that the grower needs to really pay attention to. Now, what this discussion is, it's photoperiod control for the grower. I'm not going to talk about it from a research standpoint because it gets to be a little, complex is not a good word particularly, but it gets to be pretty complex. And just to show you, there's a large difference among cultivars. What we've seen, we've done just a little bit of looking, and it appears that cultivars are extremely different in their response to photoperiod. So that's sort of what we want to get. We want to sort of avoid that whole discussion about those differences and say, is there one way we can do it? Photoperiod controls both tuber formation and flowering in dahlias, and so that's sort of the discussion we want to have is how do I use the photoperiod to affect tuber formation and to affect flowering. And the big question is, can the grower use one photoperiod control strategy to produce dahlias? And the simple answer to that is yes, you can, and that's really what I want to do, because if we look at differences among cultivars, what we see is that the differences we can sort of forget when we look at production, because the one strategy, if you use the one strategy for all dahlias, you will get the results that you need. And to make it simple, what happens is some of them are less photoperiodic than others, but if you use photoperiod control, you're not going to affect those that don't respond to photoperiod very much. So there is one strategy, and that strategy is the thing we want to talk about, is what is that one strategy you can use. The simple recommendation is that if you're producing dahlia liners, liners should be rooted with a 14-hour day length, and that's true for all dahlias, whether they respond to photoperiod or not. The 14-hour day length is really not going to it'll be a huge effect on those that respond to photoperiod. It won't bother those that don't respond to photoperiod. And why 14-hour day length during propagation? Simply, these pictures show very clearly. You'll see that even during the short propagation time, these little dahlias will form tubers. And the problem with tubers, or the issue that you have to worry about with tubers, is once the dahlia starts forming tubers, it becomes less vigorous. And what happens is a plant physiologically takes the energy that should be producing leaves and growth and plant and puts it into tuber formation. And actually, it's interesting because I've looked at this. Once that little liner starts forming tubers, it's really difficult to get it to reverse and get vegetative again. They sort of set for quite a long time. Almost this plant looks, it almost goes dormant. So that's why you really need to use 14-hour day length during propagation. Often the question comes, how much, how many long days, how many short days do you need? It's not clear, but if you look at the literature, some of the older research has shown in some cultivars that as little as 2 days of short days will trigger this tuber formation. So it's important that they stay under this 14-hour day length and during the entire propagation. Once they form tubers, like I say, you can move them to a long day or 14-hour day length, and you really can't reverse it. So it's important that from day one when you stick them, they'd be under the long day or in 14-hour day length, and they stay under that 14-hour day length during the entire propagation phase. Then the other part of this is we say we grow dahlias under long days with a minimum 14-hour day length. Again, it has to do with this tuber formation, and then we'll talk about flowering shortly, but basically we can form tubers very quickly even in the early growth stage. So grow dahlias under 14-hour day length. Why under 14-hour day length, minimum day length? This shows you an example of that. This is a plant early production. Probably this was taken in February, March, in a greenhouse, and you'll see this plant in this was in a 6-inch pot, and you can see very clearly tubers forming. So you can make tubers, and again, actually with a little experience, I can go into a greenhouse and almost tell what photoperiod the dahlias are under, because once they start forming tubers, they again look they look a little dormant. They basically will stop growth. They will flower, but the flowers will come out really small, and you'll just see less vigor. And unfortunately, this plant, if a consumer gets this and plants it outdoors, they'll pay a large price too, because the plant, although it will begin to grow a little bit, it still will always sort of be a little slower to grow, and the flowers will be certainly much smaller. So it is important that that 14-hour day length be continued even after they're potted. Now, why 14-hour day length instead of night interruption? The simple answer to that is that you can use night interruption. What we've seen on some cultivars, and I don't know how widespread it is, but on some cultivars, a night interruption will delay flowering for a week or two. So if you want the no tubers and the fastest flowering, the 14 hours is the best. If you're not worried about that little bit of delay in flowering, I mean, they'll go ahead and flower normally, and they actually won't form tubers at a night interruption. So if that's easier, as long as you realize that you may delay flowering slightly, you can use night interruption. But the important thing is the 14 hours. And then the big question that growers ask often is, when can I discontinue the 14-hour day length? And my answer to that is that, well, remember when the equinox is. The equinox is March 20th, and the equinox means that you have a 12-hour photoperiod. It'll be a little longer than that because of twilight, but basically you have a 12-hour photoperiod. So the simple answer to that is I would light them, light them during the entire production. If you got them in an area where you got lights, I would just leave the lights on until, basically till you sell them is okay. But just remember that you can't turn it off. You can't turn it off in March because that's way too early. Because again, you'll start forming tubers and not do a nice thing for the consumer. So the dahlia, you see here, you can produce really a very, very nice plant. I think most of the problem I've seen in dahlia production, and this is true of, like I say, across the board in the different series, is the tuber formation. And you're not using 14-hour photoperiods during propagation or during that early production. So the important point is, can you use one strategy for dahlias? The one strategy is propagate them under 14-hour day length, grow them under 14-hour day length, and you'll produce a plant that is absolutely the best for the best look for the retail shelf and the best performance for the end consumer. So that's sort of the quick photoperiod control of dahlias. I'm sorry it's not live, but if you have questions, certainly there's my email address, and send the questions, and we'll tell you everything we know about, as much as we know about dahlias, or answer any questions that you might have about some of the things I talked about. Thanks much, and happy spring.